Hello. Hi. How are you? I am doing well. I am doing really well because I have changed around my bookshelves and I'm so in love with what I've done. I've decided to take you on a little new tour to show you what I've done, and I think you're really going to like it. But there was a couple things I wanted to say up front. One, I failed my book buying ban. Are we surprised? I'm not surprised. In fact, I am totally not surprised. This is exactly what I was expecting. I don't often like to go into goals thinking I'm not going to do that. But since my book buying ban video is one of my most popular videos, I really wanted to come on here and offer that transparency. I have not counted my TBR shelf, but I can guarantee you that I certainly have more than 121, which is what I started with this year on my book buying ban year. But I'm not that upset because number one, I love books. I love books so much. They are my hobby. They are the thing that I turn to for comfort and joy. And number two, I buy a lot of thrifted secondhand books. Number three, I've had an exceptional reading year. I think I'm at pause for kitty scratches. I've read almost 75 books this year, so I'm doing great and I'm not really that upset by it. But I wanted the transparency of the fact that I've very clearly failed my book buying ban, if that's not obvious. And if out of all of the goals that I had this year, that is the one goal that I do not reach, I'm not going to be upset. I mean, I haven't reached it. I've officially failed. Oh well. I will say that another goal that I had was to stop buying coffees at coffee shops, except for my one local coffee shop, which I've got a gift card for myself. And I've done really good at that. So at least I have not spent too much money on coffees this year. It's fine. I don't have to justify myself to anyone but myself. Now I want to show you a little bit of the process of me moving things around because it was one of the best days I've had in a really long time. It was such a great time. It was a Saturday, and let's get into it. I'm going to start with the TBR shelves right here because I think it will clear the way for a lot of space and it'll just make it easier because once the TBR shelf is done, then all the other books can just be placed all around the apartment. So basically everything on this shelf, I am going to put here. Okay, I think I am going to be a little controversial here and I'm going to give up the idea of genres and instead do colors because I just really want a bright, colorful bookshelf. Okay, so that was me moving everything around. One of my favorite things to do is rearrange my apartment. So this day was deeply, deeply satisfying to me, and I was exhausted at the end of it, but it didn't actually take me as long as I thought it would. So that is good to know. But for now, let's get into a tour and let me show you all of the changes that I've made and my new cozy reading setup, which I am completely in love with. Okay, let's start in the bedroom because this is probably one of the bigger changes. I am obsessed with cookbooks. As you can see, they're one of my favorite genres. I love to buy them. They're so expensive, so I haven't bought one in a really long time. But this is my cookbook collection, which for the longest time was in the storage bin under my couch, which was not ideal. And one of the goals that I have this fall is to cook more new recipes. And so what I want to do is I want to every week take a cookbook from the shelf, flip through it, pick a couple of recipes and cook from it. And you can see here that one of the cookbooks is missing because it is currently on my desk. It is Cool Beans. It's one of my favorite cookbooks. It's all about beans. I love it so much. This is currently separated kind of by genre a little bit. I have all of my vegetarian cookbooks here. I have more lifestyle and general cookbooks along this way, and then I have regional cookbooks because I'm also a big fan of buying cookbooks from specific cultures and regions and studying them and learning about them. I think it's just one of the most interesting ways to expand your horizon. And then I just have a little bit of knickknacks. I have some plants that I'm propagating. I have this, honestly, I know this is random. This is supposed to be a bookshelf tour. I swear by this for all of my dry-handed people out there, especially in the winter. If you live in a dry climate, ooh, 10 out of 10 recommend. Voodoo doll that my friend got me from New Orleans. I've got a beautiful little feather, more plants that I've propagated successfully. So that's the bookshelf. Very much love it. And then in here, really quickly, all I wanted to show you was how much space I've now cleared out on these shelves, which is fantastic. These are kind of just like books that I didn't necessarily love, but I want to keep because I either have like a special attachment to them or I did like them, but I didn't necessarily love them and I just don't have enough room on my shelves. But this is all my nonfiction, which is a lot of war history and a lot of Canadian history, as you can tell. And I really like it. It's so satisfying. And then these are all Tom's books, which love it, love him, think that this looks great, can't wait to fill it. Okay, so this is an overview of all of my red shelves. Oh my gosh, this makes me so unbelievably happy. It's so beautiful. It's so nice to be able to display books as well. I'm just so in love. So let's dive into it. I think one of the bigger adjustments is I got rid of my TBR cart that I had and replaced it with an entire bookshelf. So on this, I basically just put some DVDs and games, Tom's consoles, and then down here are my Outlander books, as well as some other random series that I've either started and not finished or are kind of just like read later, not super urgent, and then a couple random nonfiction books that I really want to read. I'm just going to go from cube to cube because there isn't a whole lot of logical organization because I wanted to go by genre, but I also wanted to go by like books that I loved. And then I also wanted to just really separate some colors so that certain books and certain shelves popped. So we'll start down here. I have kind of a classics / literary, some of my faves shelf. I have Rilke, who I love so very much, and I have my Jane Austen, all of the Jane Austens that I read last summer. That's an entire series. It's an entire playlist. Check it out if you'd like. And then I have my Oxford World Classics collection, missing a couple Russian books. I really, really love these editions. I just think that they're really pretty and they often have the best translations and notes, in my opinion. And then we have some Plath and just some other randoms. This is only here because it's white. This is certainly not a favorite classic of mine, just throwing that out there. That's gonna happen probably a lot in this bookshelf tour, is that there's just random books shoved in certain places that maybe don't fit, but that's because I'm working with a limited space here. In terms of the books that I have facing out, they're mainly either favorite books or I just really, really liked the cover, and that's the case with this. So this is my Sarah J. Maas / one random graphic novel that I really loved. I like Sarah J. Maas. I don't necessarily love her. I have read a lot of her work. I haven't read The Crescent City, but I mean, she's such a great ride. I do love falling into the stories, and these are all the ones that I've read and really enjoyed. I most recently read this last month, The Devil Makes Three. It was good. It wasn't fantastic, but oh my gosh, this cover is phenomenal. And it does have pretty decent vibes. I really like the setting. It's kind of a haunted library. It's very cozy. This shelf is very similar. It's fantasy that I liked, not loved. They're great books. I would highly recommend them, but I didn't necessarily give them like 5 out of 5 stars. I really love Beauty and the Beast retellings. This is one of my favorite, and I just really like the cover. And I have the North Wind randomly back there. I don't know if I plan to read on in this series, but I put this up here. Got the Shadow and Bone series. I really like the Dark Shores series, but I haven't continued on. We have a Beauty and the Beast retelling from the Beast perspective, Legend Board, which was fantastic. I've read 2 books in this series, and I really liked it. I have started this book, but I DNF'd it at the time. I really want to give it another chance because it did have good vibes. Love For the Wolf, also a Beauty and the Beast retelling, big fan. I love Interview with the Vampire. It probably doesn't necessarily belong on this shelf, to be honest, but I didn't have anywhere else to put it. And then this is the Fourth Wing book, which I've shared my thoughts in previous video, and, you know, I'm probably going to read on in that series. And then these 2 were also really, really great. Great pirate fantasy and just like overall good plot, good vibes. Into it. Moving on over here, one of my favorite things about this is I've been given the opportunity to kind of highlight some of my favorite writers, which is really exciting because otherwise all of these books were shoved in Tom's office far away. So here I actually have all of the Dave Eggers books that I own, which is really thrilling for me. Here's another one. It's tucked behind the Mary Oliver. So these are general literature that I love and that I go to on a regular basis. We've got The Count of Monte Cristo. This is random because this is kind of like a graphic novel, I would suppose, but it's just a fantastic story. I really, really recommend it. I've read Dante's Inferno. Some of this is nonfiction, but we have all of the Dave Eggers books. We got some Can Lit that I really enjoyed, some Bo Burnham, some nonfiction writing books. Again, there's not really a method to this madness. Oh, I also have Wild by Cheryl Strayed, which I actually genuinely love that book. I think it's fantastic. And then facing out, I have my Mary Oliver, whom I love. Moving up from this is kind of a historical fiction / history shelf. This is nonfiction. This is not a fictional story. It's fantastic though. And I had nowhere else to put it, so I've placed it on here. This is a horror book, and I really, really love the cover, so that's why it's facing out. All historical fiction. Susanna Kearsley is a Canadian author. She has a really good grasp on history, and I highly recommend reading The Winter Sea if you like historical fiction, because that's one of my favorites, and she's definitely a comfort author for me. Moving on over here, I've got my favorite fantasy books. These are 5 out of 5 reads. They span YA and adult. There is, again, very little method to the madness of my shelf organization, but I've talked about the Dark of the West trilogy. If you love war-inspired fantasy, this book series is definitely for you. I love Joanna Hathaway's writing. It's just phenomenal. This is probably my favorite YA series of all time. I love it so much. I will reread it until the end of days. And then I have Babel and the Six of Crows duology, which I'm currently reading the second book. Loving it. Can't wait to finish it. Scared to finish it. Just completely enthralled with it. The Night Circus, definitely one of my favorites. And then this is also kind of a comfort series. I read this series a few years ago. I've actually read it twice now, and I just really, really like it. It's just fun. It's something that I feel like young Megan would really, really love, and the best feelings when I think about this series. This is the Air Awakened series by Elise Kova. And then moving on over here, we've got just, again, not really separated by genre, more of a color scheme going on. These are like books that I loved. So like 4 to 5 out of 5 stars, not necessarily life-changing all-time favorites, but just books that I really, really loved and enjoyed reading. I mean, to be honest, a lot of these books on this shelf belong in that category, but like these would be the ones that I would highly recommend and just think are phenomenal. I listened to Anatomy, a Love Story on audio last year, and I just love this book so much. I'm definitely going to reread it. It is just such a fun ride. I love the atmosphere. I love the main character. I have yet to read the second book in the series. I really want to, but I am going to ask for it for Christmas, so I don't necessarily have to buy it. This was a snail mug, like a coffee mug that had a little snail inside of it that I broke one day, and it breaks my heart. So this guy is forever chilling on my shelves. Tucked behind, I have Into the Wilderness, which I highly, highly recommend if you are a fan of the Outlander series and you are looking for a book that feels very similar. This series is for you. This is essentially sponsored by Diana Gabaldon. Claire and Jamie actually make an appearance in here, believe it or not. I think it's blurbed by Diana Gabaldon. It's so, so good. I just really enjoy it. I read it years ago though, when I was in my like post-Outlander craze and needed books that felt like Outlander. Tom found this series for me and I really like this one. Letters to a Young Poet. Again, more Rilke, love him so very much. I got really into Can Lit this year and the River Trice. Nope, let's try that again. I got really into Can Lit this year, Canadian literature, and it's just been like, it's been good. It's been surprisingly good. I've read a lot of books that I really enjoyed, and one of them was The River Twice. My best friend got this for me when she took me on like a bookstore tour for my birthday, and I told her I wanted her to pick me out a book. She literally picked this one up, and it's like absolutely perfect for me. It's like set in southern Ontario, and it follows a soldier from World War I and the aftermath. It's really, really good. It's kind of devastating, obviously. I bought this book on my road trip and I loved it. It's phenomenal. I'm going to read everything from this author going forward. The Book of Accidents is a recent favorite. I loved it. I'm not going to go through every single one. I feel like that would take forever. But honestly, I could talk about every single one of these books because I really, really loved them in their own specific way. They just make me so happy. I really like the colors and I just love books. And then these are just the blue favorites, I suppose. We've got Frederick Bachman, devoured this series, bawled my eyes out. Trevor Noah is such a phenomenal writer. I love him so much. I love this book. He has a new book coming out, which I don't think has been officially announced, but I think it's on Goodreads, and I simply must read it. The Bear and the Nightingale series, love this series so much. I only own the first one. I just can't justify buying the other two yet, but it would be a dream to own all three because I loved this series so very much. And then under here, again, there's no method to the actual genres of it, but again, these are books that I loved and that I would highly recommend. We've got The Secret History, spoiler alert, loved it. Head Full of Ghosts, phenomenal horror, just like good vibes. Very, very formulaic, but like done it in a good way. I love the writing. The Island of Missing Trees, A Farewell to Arms, I recently read and sobbed at the end of it. It was so, so good. Pachinko, solid historical fiction. And Lonely Castle in the Mirror is such a good book. I was influenced by Allison Pages to pick that up because it's one of her favorite books. And it's so good. It's so cute and heartfelt. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead features Megan when she's older. I just feel like that character is very much me. And again, more Can Lit, the Saturday Night Ghost Club. This is actually set in the place where Tom is from, so a lot of the places that they explore, he explored growing up, and that was really neat to read. Okay, this up here are my all-time favorites, life-changing reads, books that just own my heart. They own a piece of my heart. They own a piece of my soul, and I will love them forever. Here we've got Angela Carter, The Bloody Chamber, which if you have not read, do not sleep on it this spooky season. It is an anthology of short stories that are twisted fairy tales, and her writing is phenomenal. I just like, I want to eat her writing and swallow it and have it become a part of me. That is how good her writing is. I've talked about many a times my love for Bronze Horseman. I don't necessarily recommend it if you are not super into love stories and romance. My all-time favorite. To know me is to know how much I love this book. A Gentleman in Moscow. Oh, I love this book so much. I want to reread it. It was so great. It felt like magical and whimsical and like Anne of Green Gables, but for adults set in Russia. That's a very specific feeling. I don't know if anyone would agree with that necessarily, but that's just what this book felt like to me. Is I loved our main character and being in his head and being in his journey. It's definitely a slow burn in terms of plot. It's a character-driven story, but I loved it. It was such a great ride. I have The Outsiders, which is one of the first books in my life that I ever read over and over and over again and felt like I loved and just made me fall in love with books in a really big way. I got my Phantom of the Opera. I've talked about it. I love Phantom of the Opera so much. It's that cross-section of musical theater and reading and stories and gothic horror and all of that jazz that just speaks so directly to my heart. You're going to see a lot of the same book, but in different editions. So I've got The Bronze Horseman, the first edition. I love to collect fun editions of books that I love. This is Outlander, which is also right there, obviously, but this is the first UK edition of Outlander that was published as cross-stitch, and it's incredibly rare. It's a very rare edition. Tom got this for me, and I actually had Diana Gabaldon herself sign it, and when she signed it, she was like, this is like a relic, and I was like, I know. So this book means so much to me, and truly it shouldn't even be on this shelf. It should be on my rare books shelf, so I might actually change that up now that I think about it. These two might go on a different shelf, but I will explain why they are not when I get to that shelf. I got my little book lover puzzle. This is the what is this called? Crown? This is a crown of flowers that I wore on my wedding. Really love it. And then I've got some Shirley Jackson, Sylvia Plath, two phenomenal writers that I absolutely love. I've got the Bell Jar Anniversary Edition that's illustrated. More of the Bronze Horseman series. I got my little Kakashi. He's here to guard all of my books. And he also loves romance, so I feel like he would love the Bronze Horseman series. I've got War and Peace. This is the first edition I ever read. This is my favorite translation. I love this translating team. Red Comet is a most recent book that I read this year. I believe I read it in February. It was another life-changing read. It is a biography of Sylvia Plath, but I've never read a biography quite like this. Heather Clark did such a phenomenal job, and this book was just so special, and I think I haven't read a book that I've loved as much as this since War and Peace, if that makes sense. Like, they just were so life-changing. I love them so much. Over here, I have a illustrated edition of Anne of Green Gables, and then all of my Anne of Green Gables books. I love them so much. Much like The Outsiders, this is very much a nostalgic read. I just love Anne of Green Gables. Reading books about her, watching the television show, watching the animated television show. I just feel like Anne of Green Gables is a real person to me. It's so weird. I'm sure many people who grew up with Anne of Green Gables feel that way as well. Then I have the Northanger Abbey annotated edition. I really want to reread this again. This is my favorite Jane Austen read, and I read this last year in the summer as part of my trying to read all of Jane Austen's work, and this book is probably my favorite work from Jane Austen. I love it so very much. It's definitely going to be a reread every year, and it made me fall in love with Austen in a way that, like, believe it or not, Pride and Prejudice didn't. I really love it. It's whip smart and fantastic and such a great cozy fall read. Okay, so this is my special edition shelf, which the reason why those two books that I called out maybe weren't put on here was because I'm actually really scared about how much this shelf can hold. It was so impossible. We had plans to do shelves all along here, but when we moved in, there's no studs on the wall. So it's not the most secure place to put shelves. And I think this was the only place we found studs, which is why there's just always this random shelf here. C'est la vie, that is life. These are some plants that I love. This is water and sand from Juno Beach from France. I've got some cool folio classic editions of Jane Austen. I've got a special edition of The Hobbit, random fun edition of Phantom of the Opera. This is the third book in the Bronze Horseman series in a first edition. I've got my Edgar Allan Poe complete collection from like over 100 years ago that Tom got me. Oops. Oh no, we have a man down. Oh my gosh. As I was saying, Tom got me this as a wedding gift and also a gift of like, congratulations, you're quitting your job and going into library science. It was very special, very sweet and romantic. I've got a special edition of Dead Souls by Gogol, which I bought for I think like $5, which is crazy. It's a modern library edition, which is very similar to a War and Peace edition that my best friend got me, and that edition sits on my desk because it is so special to me. And then we have more of the cross-stitch edition of Outlander and all of the Bronze Horseman series. This is not a reading copy, as you can tell. The spine is not cracked, but because my other one is so beloved, I wanted a clean version because, I didn't have enough. I don't know. These are my wedding shoes. They have my little kitties stitched on, which I love so much. Look at them. They're looking at birds. And then also my favorite flower, which is forget-me-nots. This is from Nova Scotia. I've gone to Nova Scotia every single summer. Growing up, it feels like a second home to me. I wish I could move there tomorrow. I would in a heartbeat. And these soldiers, one of which had fallen, are from Normandy. I have plans to potentially make this my immediate TBR shelf if I find that it's too overwhelming having all of my books hidden. We shall see. But for now, it's kind of just fairy tales, random books that I still really want to read, which is this cultural history of Russia book I really want to read. Covers that I really like. This Small Favors book is really good, and I love the cover. And then also just Titanic, Hadestown, gotta represent. Got a pumpkin. I've got Grimm's fairy tales, which I really like. More Russian fairy tales here and here. The Magic of Medicine and Plants. These are kind of another edition of Phantom of the Opera. Okay, and now we're getting to my most special, most favorite part of the tour, which is my TBR shelf and my TBR corner. This makes me so happy. I've already sat in it a bunch of times to read. It is so cozy. It's so special. Ugh, I just love it so very much. Up here we have my Russian shelf. The reason why I put this up here is because I actually realized that I have about 50% of this read. 50% is read, 50% is still to read. So I wanted to put it somewhere that was highlighted, and I didn't want to break up my Russian literature because I love it so much. So I thought that I would put it up here and have its own space, and I think it worked out quite perfectly. So it's actually funny looking at the spines. You can really see the ones that I've read and the ones that are still to be read. Although Crime and Punishment I read, but I guess the spine is a little bit more sturdy. So yes, these are all my Russian books that I still have to read and or have read and loved, and they just make me so happy. I also have my favorite stuffed animal growing up. His name is Froggy, and this is also my little sun guy, which I love. I put my animal spirit tarot cards here because sometimes I like to pull them when I'm journaling, and then I got my little skull friend who I've had for a very long time. So these are organized kind of by genre, but again, I'm not super strict about it. I mainly just wanted lots of colors to pop because I love books, and books are colorful and beautiful, but you can have a balance of both. I don't need to prove my love of books to anyone who may judge the fact that I've separated them by color. They're my favorite form of decorating any kind of living space I've ever lived in. So books can be many things, and one of those things are decorations. They are what I love to surround myself in. So I'm going to stop justifying why I did this and go into the specific shelves and how I organize them. Down here we have a sleeping kitty. That's where he likes to hang out throughout the day. He's got a little cozy spot that he loves. Here I've got my nonfiction shelf. That is my nonfiction TBR shelf. I've read The Indifferent Stars Above, but I really want to reread it again. Same with Revolutionary Russia. We got Stasiland, which is stories from behind the Berlin Wall. I really want to read that book. We've got Stephen King's On Writing. I keep telling myself I'm going to read it. I need to read it. Force me to read it. Please sit me down and force me to read it. And then going in here, we've got fantasy, which is why there's a fantasy book put right there. This is fantasy, both YA and adult, again, separated kind of by color. We've got the Gilded Ones, which I really need to read. I got this in a special edition owl crate that I got one year for Christmas. Snow and Rose, I really want to read. I think that'd be such a great cozy read. So you can see that I broke up my TBR cart that I posted a couple weeks ago. That was my fall TBR, but I will remember. I also think I'm going to list them in my bullet journal, and we'll see how I find it. If I find that I'm missing having my actual monthly TBRs all on one shelf, I got a game plan, which is to put them over here on this shelf if I miss it. So then moving up as well, I have more fantasy / horror, both adult and middle grade and YA. The Dollmaker of Krakow. This is such a beautiful cover, and I definitely plan to read this winter. So I've got this facing out. A Dowry of Blood. Oh, I just cannot wait to read this book. I am so excited. I am going to read it in October for sure. I think I'm going to love it. I'm hyping it up so much that I'm worried, but I'm also not that worried. I just think I'm going to love it so much. And then we have some other newer things that I've purchased, such as The Witch and the Tsar, but like this cover is so gorgeous. I am definitely going to read If We Were Villains since I've read The Secret History first. I was told in my fall TBR to read The Secret History first, and I'm really glad that I did because I just really liked that book, and I feel like I got my OG dark academia out of the way, which is fantastic. Not out of the way, that sounds really harsh. I genuinely enjoyed it. I'm also really excited to read the Scythe trilogy. I've recently purchased this one. So as you can see, I did fail miserably on my book buying ban. Oh my gosh, I was editing this and I realized that I completely skipped over this shelf. So let's talk about it. But I have my Edgar Allan Poe, the complete works, Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. I really want to read this in November, so I'm going to read this book in November, I hope. We'll see. But that's why that's right there. This is all like general fiction, horror, classics, all that jazz, the huge. I really want to read Les Miserables in January. I think that's going to be the next book my best friend and I read together. I have Regeneration by Pat Barker. I've read that book. I love that book. I read that in university. I really want to read it again. It's World War I historical fiction. It's fictionalized history, I will say. I've got more Virginia Woolf that I absolutely need to read. I've got Hemingway. I've got some books that appeared on my fall TBR that I've already talked about. I want to read Steinbeck. I've got a Rilke book that I haven't read yet, and then All Quiet on the Western Front I've actually read. I love that book, but I really want to read it again. Let's move on to historical fiction / general fiction. I just recently bought this book as well. I just really am excited to read this. This is by Zulfa Cateau. I've been told that it will make me sob, which is just really what I'm craving right now. So I'm excited to read this, but more so because I just know that it's a phenomenal book and not necessarily because of the subject matter, but it's also a fantastic cover. And I love having it faced out. I might just like keep some of these books on the shelf facing out, even though I've read them. We shall see. And then behind it, I have more historical fiction. Some historical fiction that I really want to read sooner rather than later is The Crimson Petal and the White. Really want to read this. Probably going to be one of my next reads. And All the Light We Cannot See, believe it or not, I have not read that book, and that's because I've heard very mixed reviews on it. So Heaven and Hell is by an Icelandic author, and I really want to get into Icelandic fiction a bit more because one of my dreams in life is to go to Iceland. I've actually dreamed of going to Iceland since I was 16 years old, so one day I will make it. We actually had a trip planned right as the pandemic started, so obviously that didn't end up happening, and it's kind of a bummer, but I will get there one day. Here we have more historical fiction. Obviously this is not historical fiction. This is a middle grade kind of fairy tale retelling of the Baba Yaga, but it's one of my favorite covers. I love it so much. This is a little snail guy, a little snail shell that I picked up that was completely empty on the ground, and I've got a beeswax candle, which smells so good when I'm sitting here in the morning. This is more historical fiction that I'm really excited to read. I think I will probably read Ice Road at some point this winter just because it is all about the ice road in Eastern Europe, and I imagine it's going to be incredibly sad, so we shall see how I feel about it. I really like historical fiction. It's one of my favorite genres, so I should probably read more of these books. It's clearly the one that I have the most books of, so gotta get on that. And then we have kind of general literature is what I would call these books, but again, there's no method to this madness. I got this little mushroom friend as a celebration of reaching 1,000 subscribers, which, oh my gosh, hello, hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy you're here. 1,000 of you are tuning in and subscribing, so that's what that is in celebration of. I found Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow at a used bookstore for $16, so I had to buy it. It is normally $34 Canadian, and I got it for $16, so I had to buy it. I really want Tom to read it because he is in video game development, and I feel like he will really love it, but I'm also equally excited to read it. And then we just have more general fiction and books that are on my TBR that I'm really excited to read. I've talked about Imaginary Friend, definitely going to read that this fall. I also got The Chestnut Man, which is more of a thriller because I've been kind of into thrillers a bit more. I really want to read Austerlitz one day, soon, very soon, we shall see. And The Overstory by Richard Powers is definitely a book I'm going to read next summer. I think it's going to be fantastic. And then last but certainly not least, we have more general fiction. We've got a little mushroom amethyst stone, which I got with my friends when we went to visit them. I've got a little pumpkin, which I love to decorate with actual real gourds. I think it's one of the best kind of ways to reduce plastic. And they're very cheap this time of year. And afterwards, I can eat certain ones, which is really great. I don't know if I can eat that one, but there are other like pumpkin pie pumpkins that I buy. I really like the colors of this, and I actually frankly needed to block this random color collection, so I put that there, and I think it works perfectly fine. Broke my book buying ban to buy Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. I'm so excited to read this. I think definitely going to read this in October. I'm laughing because I keep saying that, but I've got a lot of books I want to read in October, and this is one of them. To be honest, I really wanted to face out this book cover too. I think I'm going to because it's such a great cover. It's such a great cover. I love it. I love the simplicity of it. I love the little designs. It's so good. I'm going to read Snowblind, which is an Icelandic thriller. I believe this is Icelandic. I'm going to read that this winter for sure. I got more Frederick Bachman that I really want to read that I feel like will make me cry. I'm just in such a big crying mood with reading. I don't know why. I got some Sally Rooney, and The Beekeeper of Aleppo is another book that I really want to read. So just very excited to read all of these stories. I think it's going to be great. And then just some odds and ends. I'm keeping my current reads here because this is basically where I read. So my current reads are going to be stacked on this little chair. Going forward, we got The Crooked Kingdom, War and Peace, and I just got this book a couple days ago for research. I got it for research. I'm really excited to read it. Okay, so there you have it. There is my tour of all of my books. Let me know, based off of my reading tastes, what you think I should read. Please give me your recommendations. I'm always looking for new books, and now that I've officially embraced the fact that I've failed my book buying ban, I'm leaning into it. I mean, not really. I'm still going to be reasonable. A couple things that I will say about failing my book buying ban is it has made me more discerning about the books that I do buy, which is really good. And I'm more careful about the books that I buy, and I make sure that I actually am genuinely excited to read them and not just looking for that like endorphin rush of buying something for yourself. We are looking for a silver lining in the failure, and I found one. So I guess that is a plus. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. I am in love with my new cozy setup, especially at nighttime or early in the morning. We've installed lights all around the wall, and they can change color, and waking up in the morning and turning them on or sitting here at night with them on, it's just been the coziest time, and I'm very, very excited to spend my winter in this chair reading all of these books. It makes me so happy, and so I'm so happy to share that happiness with you. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.